Hello, friends. Welcome back to the School of Self Worth. I get to share a conversation today that really had me thinking so deeply about how important it is for you to pursue your passions and to share it in the world. Today, I'm so honored to welcome guest Maggie Gelin, a passionate vocal coach dedicated to helping singers go from having a limited voice, stage fright, and no creativity to experiencing vocal freedom, confidence, and authenticity. In our conversation, I learned so much about singing as expression, connection, and self care, and why it's so important to keep choosing activities that require us to expand and to grow. Get ready for so much insight and depth in this conversation with Maggie. And if you're a high achieving career woman who wants to uncover the number one blind spot preventing fast, intuitive decisions, I have a 72-second assessment for you. DM me quiz at Nicole Song on Instagram. Okay, everyone, let's get into this beautiful conversation. Hi, everyone. I am so excited to be here with Maggie Gelin. Maggie, welcome to the School of Self Worth.
Thank you so much for having me, Nicole. I really appreciate being here.
Well, I know Maggie from an entrepreneur group, and I have always just loved your energy. So that was part of why I wanted you to come in. And I also really wanted her to be a guest and to speak because she talks or she trains people and works with people on singing. And I love music. I'm a violinist. And so to me, music is like this really cool, I feel like it's a really important, cool part of our lives that we don't always talk about from like this idea of learning to sing. And then I just actually was really curious. I'm like, gosh, it must take a lot to get the confidence up to sing and to have that worth and value be like I can do this and to learn. And so that's what I'd actually love to hear from you, Maggie, is to share a little bit about your own journey with singing. And then let's just start there. Like, what has your journey been to have singing be your main occupation, really?
Oh, should I go for the long version or do you want to have like the short bite-sized version?
Whichever version you feel called to share with us.
Okay, so I think the start is really important because that put everything else into motion. And for me, singing has always been a great passion. And as with many singers, when we have that passion, we want to do more of that. So my heart was going to, when I was in high school, I want to do performing arts. I want to do, the singing, the music, the dancing, the musical theater, all those kind of things. And my parents were like, no, you cannot do that because you have to pay bills when you're older.
Mhm.
And I remember that the first 2 years of, I guess that would not be high school in the US, but something else, middle school. It's middle school before high school, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So middle school, I did Latin and like very high, lots of studying things that I did not enjoy at all. But that was the deal with my parents. If you do those studies, then in high school you can do performing arts. And I
Mm.
remember my parents are divorced. That my dad did not want me to do that. And although my dad didn't agree, my mom, she has been an amazing supporter along my whole journey. She was the one that enrolled me into that high school. And that's where it's really started for me. Singing was part of it, but acting as well. It was the whole performing arts shebang. But that moment taught me that, how can I say this? It taught me that whatever your purpose, passion in life is, you will find a way. And I was so grateful that one of my parents was very supportive. And now that I'm actually making a living from what I love to do, of course, my dad is 100% supportive because I get to pay my bills. But he's more the type of person who first wants to see it before he can believe it. And I think that's one of the mindsets that many singers have. They love to sing, but it's a unrealistic dream that they might have or something from childhood that as an adult is not responsible, and I'm putting that with air quotes. Now seeing that with a lot of people that I work with, that is this kind of desire that's been in their heart for forever, but they never actually took a chance on that. And having that pivotal moment in the beginning of my journey that has been the theme all the way through. I told you earlier in our conversation before we started recording that I spent a year in the US also studying music. That too was an incredible experience that I would never thought was possible, but it's having that desire, having that drive, and having that passion for whatever goal you set out to have, right? That really drove me, and I think that drove me to where I am today. So very grateful for that.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. Thank you. I feel like for so many people listening, whether it's singing, and there might be some out there who are like, yeah, I have this dream of singing that I like really quashed at some point. There's so many of us where we have goals where it's like, oh, we had this dream, we had this thing we wanted to do, and then somebody
Mhm.
said something, and then you all of a sudden no longer could do it. Like mine was in high school, I wanted to be a paleontologist, which is like studying dinosaurs. And my father was definitely like, there's no money in that. And I was like, well, who
Mm.
cares? It's studying dinosaurs, right? And
Yeah.
like, I just thought that was so cool. And I did not ultimately study dinosaurs, but it was one of those things where it's really interesting how people are trying to help you, like, oh, you should be able to make
Mm.
money. You should be able to do something so practical. And I've made some choices that weren't, the traditional ladder myself either, like teaching yoga full time, but people just, it's sort of funny how unintentionally they
Mhm.
start to squash those dreams like when you're younger. And I love how for you, you actually were able to recognize that you could still pursue it, you could still find that passion. And that's where I'm interested, because I think for most people listening, what has happened is that they got quashed at some point, and then they
Mhm.
actually didn't return to it, or now as adults are trying to figure out how to return to something that brings them passion and joy and fun instead of being on the ladder that they've been on. And so I'm
Mhm.
curious for you in that journey, like how did you maintain that focus, and how did you maintain the ability to like say, okay, no, like this is really what I want to be doing with my life?
Oh, I have so many things to share about this topic. I want to share two main things because you're asking about my journey. And to be honest, I was a very selfish person. I just wanted to do whatever made me happy, like regardless of what my parents might think or even my boyfriend at the time. Although we are married now, so it ended up fine.
Good.
But
Congratulations.
I
Yes.
think that was it. In the beginning, if I'm being really, really honest, it's just having that selfish feeling of I want what I want. And I've always been very stubborn. Now, that's not my best quality. However, now that I'm a little bit older, maybe a little bit wiser, that selfish feeling has evolved into what's the word I'm looking for? Looking into what can I do that makes me happy so that I can help the people around me feel happy. And that's been the driving force for the last few years.
Mm.
So I like to use the metaphor of the oxygen mask on the plane. There, the steward people, like, they tell you if in case of emergency the oxygen pressure drops, then you're going to have an oxygen mask coming from the ceiling. And then they say something really interesting. They say put your oxygen mask on first before helping anyone else. And in that context, that sounds so logic. Like, of course I'm going to put on my oxygen before I can help my kids, because if I don't have any oxygen, I'll just pass out, and then my kids will pass out too. So, in that context, it's really normal. But in our daily life, oftentimes we're not operating in that way. And we're putting everyone else's needs first. So, if you're a mom, then obviously the needs of your children go first, or the needs of your partner if you're in a relationship, or the needs of your parents that might need more care. And by doing that, I found myself losing my own energy and my own happiness. And then I noticed that if I'm not well, I cannot serve the people that I love around me, or even the singers that I work with. And that's where I started to pivot to I do whatever makes me happy, regardless of what anyone thinks, being that selfish little girl, to taking that self care in order to serve others. And I think that has been, for me personally, the key to everything that I'm doing today.
Well, it doesn't sound actually selfish to me. Maybe that's how
Mhm.
you defined it when you were younger, but it
Yeah,
does sound like I always often have to ask myself that question, like, does it work for me
yeah,
first before asking if it works for everybody else? Because it's so easy for all of us. And I'd say especially women, but I think it's true for many people. Like you just are asking what other people need, and then you just so automatically help them
yeah,
versus yourself. And it sounds like you just had sort of that ability when you were younger to just stay very focused on what you wanted. And maybe everyone said, that's so selfish, Maggie. But actually,
oh
what you were
yeah.
doing is what you needed to be doing so that you could be on the path you needed to be on.
I appreciate that. Thank you for reframing that because you're right. That is something that I've been hearing my whole life, how selfish that is to go after your dreams. And I think that's definitely something they might have said that out of precaution, and like we talked about earlier, they have well intentions. I mean, if I look at my brother, he's a bioengineer, he's got the phd in science, whatever. We're the opposite, and so of course that's scary for parents. You see one child being that highly educated person, and then the other is super creative and all over the place. I can understand where they were coming from.
Totally. And I feel like there's so much, I understand again, they had great intentions, like you
Yeah.
said, and then you have to retrain yourself. And I feel like
Hmm.
as adults, so much of it is this programming reset in your brain of like, oh, even though I have children, I still have to actually choose myself first. And
Hmm.
that doesn't mean I always am telling my clients, I'm like, you don't have to put yourself first all day long. It's not like 24/7 you're first, but it's like if there is 0 minutes of the day where you're actually putting yourself ahead of other people, like that's never going to serve, whether it's serving your families or the relationships you have or your teams, or like in your
Hmm.
case, serving the people that you're working with. And I'm
Yeah.
also in that position as well. And I'm like, well, I have to be in a good place or I
Yeah.
can't do the things that I'm meant to do in the world. And so
Exactly.
I love how you're sharing in that story because I think it's helpful for people who are starting that journey or in that journey, or sometimes you've chosen that journey and then you can still struggle with that because you can, we're both entrepreneurs. You can go very easily into the other end of just like constant work and service and then forgetting to fuel yourself. That's not what we're
Yep.
here to talk about, but I'm just saying like that's that can happen really easily.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So I'm curious for you then now, like when you're looking at that singing journey, and so you just were like, okay, this is really what I want to do and to help people with it. Where do you find for so many people the blocks around this? Because I can think of how you teach singing as a metaphor for so many of the women I work with, where they're
Hmm.
just starting to try something new. They're taking some risks. They're considering leaving jobs. And how do you help people? Like, what are the kind of people who come to you? Like, what are they wanting help with? Like, what are they struggling with when they begin this journey?
I love that question. So, what they tell me that they need, obviously, is vocal technique. I want my
Mm.
voice to perform better, right? I want to sing the high notes, I want to sing the low notes. And when we start working together, we quickly notice that it's not about the notes at all. It's about the deeper stuff. It's about the perfectionism. It's about the fear of judgment. It's about the criticism and how to handle all of that. And because there's all of those fears beneath the surface, they are afraid to fully express themselves. And that results in a tensed voice, a hoarse voice,
Mm.
whatever. And then they think the solution is a little bit of vocal technique. And of course, don't get me wrong, vocal technique is so important. And it's way more powerful when you're applying the techniques, whatever it could be, because we're talking about singing. But as you say, it's a metaphor for life, right? There's techniques for anything, to get a new job or to go to a job interview. I'm sure there's techniques for that. How you show up in those instances is the key. So let me give you an example. I could go to a concert. Let me ask you that question. You go to a concert and there's two singers singing that evening. The first one is like technique wise on point, like every note is right. Um, all the riffs are right. Everything is like, I would say, perfect in air quotes. Singer B, she makes you feel something. She
Mm.
makes you remember something. She might even let you, shed a little tear. She gives you goosebumps. She might not sing perfectly, but that person touches your soul. When you're going home that night and your friend asks you, "Oh, how was the concert?" What singer will you be talking about most?
I mean, for sure, the one who brings in the emotion.
Yes.
I'm going to give you another metaphor to this too, because I was at a book talk last night and my friends and I were talking about the books that move you and the ones you think about. And they're not always the best ones or the ones that like are perfect, but the
Mhm.
ones that you just keep thinking about for a long time afterward. And that's how I would feel about because there was like some emotion or some depth in that
Mhm.
book that was different and then you just couldn't quite get over those characters. But I feel like the same thing in a performance. Like um, you would feel well, and I'll just give this example. I've been talking about her a lot, but I went to see Beyonce just a month ago, and she is
Oh.
like, she has perfected both the vocal technique and
Yep.
the emotion and the
Mhm.
connection. Like she's
Mhm.
just so powerful. She knows how to just look around, and she's on a screen, like you can barely see her.
Yeah.
She's tiny, right? But you could just feel like
Yeah.
she makes you feel, and so you're
Oh.
just like, oh, and she sings about such powerful topics, all of that. But it's really
Mhm.
amazing to have because her vocal range is incredible.
Mhm.
And like you said, there's many perfect singers out there, and she's not who she is because of her vocal range.
And that's exactly, you're hitting, what do they say? The nail on the head on the nail. Um, um, you feel her presence. And
Mhm.
she's doing that by showing up authentically, by opening herself up to being vulnerable to your criticism, to everyone's criticism in the room. But she's opening herself up to that. While singer A, if we go back to the little question earlier, the perfect technical singer, they're closed off from all of that. So I think really the point is, and what great artists, all of them do, is showing up authentically and
Mhm.
daring to do so. So daring to look at what's holding me back to fully show up as myself, what's holding me back to go after my goals, to go after my dreams, to share what I want to share, like what's in the way of that. And once you can look at that, then the rest will grow automatically. And yes, the techniques are important. Like that's definitely something. It's the synergy between the two that will make the magic.
Well, it's so perfect because this is part of the reason I wanted to have the conversation. I feel like it's such a metaphor for anything that you're wanting to do because I feel like for so many women who are perfectionists or they have that people pleasing side, which is frankly most of us, right? That we
Mhm.
have that feeling that it's because we're afraid of what people will think if we start to diverge off the pathway that like our
Yeah.
parents said, "Oh, well, how are you going to make money?" And then we just hear
Mhm.
that all the time and we just keep doing
Mhm.
it versus understanding that there is something for you to share in the world. And like you do it with singing, and I do it with people around showing up in their purpose and who they really are. And it can be really scary because you're like, oh, well, this is outside the lane I've ever been before. And
Yeah.
this requires me to be vulnerable. And it's interesting because it's not even like they're afraid of what other people will say. It's like, what will they think of themselves?
Mhm. Yep. Yep. I
That can
recognize
be,
that.
I think, the most challenging thing of like, ooh,
Mhm.
like what is it like to start to go outside those lanes? And then I'm like, well, actually outside those lanes is freedom, but that's like, down the road. Like you have to work to get yourself to that point. But I'm
Uh-huh.
curious if that comes up for your singers too. It's like that new access to freedom when they really are singing.
Definitely. And I can share two things. For me personally, and this is actually something I haven't shared yet, but it might be interesting for your listeners. What has driven me since the start of my journey is the question: if I would have cancer next month, would I still be doing what I want to be doing? So the
Mm.
idea, and it might sound a little bit morbid, but the idea of that we're going to die someday and like we don't know when that day will be, that kind of like grounds me back into the present, and asking myself that question at least once a week helps me to evaluate, like, am I actually doing what I want to be doing? And if the question is no, then something needs to change. And I think that question has been driving me throughout my whole journey, and that's what made me be where I am today. Now for singers, I have to share that with my singers because I think it can help them as well.
Well, I was
Um,
gonna say before you say what's next, but I
yeah.
love that question actually, because I think if you're like the answer is no, then there's something to look at because it's
Mhm.
super easy for us to just be like, we have this life and we have so much time. And we think that time is this like, and like it's weird. Like we feel very constrained in our schedules, but then we think in the long term that time is an endless resource when it's
Oh,
actually the opposite, right? Because you
yeah.
have control over your schedule, but you don't actually have control over the longevity of your own life, right? So can you actually, because I ask myself that, I wouldn't say every week, but I feel like I should put it on my little sticky pad over here, like question to ask myself, because I do actually feel like I have put everything into the life I have right now and I don't have
Mhm.
any regrets. Like I have put it all out on the table. That was not true 10 years ago.
Mhm.
Like it was not true at different times in my life. And so
Mhm.
if that question prompts anything for anyone listening, I think it's an important prompt of like, have you given it your all? Like, have you put everything on the table in relationships, in work, in your family, and all the things you care about, your health? And if that's not true, like, oh, be interested there, you know?
Yes, 100%. And then it's also finding that balance of, because some people might say, "Oh no, I just want to be on a beach in Hawaii, for the rest of my life." So no, I'm not where I want to be right now. I need to go take a plane and spend all my money. Like that would not be, I think, an safe way to go about that question.
Mhm.
Although when I think about it, I don't want to be on a beach in Hawaii for the rest of my life, spending my money there. I want to be doing what I'm doing right now, and that's helping people through singing. So it also depends on what kind of personality. And I think all the people listening here definitely get what I'm saying here, because the answer that will come up will just make you more in your power and in your purpose, which is what you're helping and guiding them with too.
Well, and I hear about the people who wanna live on Hawaii forever too, and I just came back from retreat in Hawaii too,
Oh,
so
nice.
it's sort of an appropriate conversation, but to me, like, when we say things like that, that's just an escape, like, that's just
Yeah.
like, I wanna escape the life that I'm in because I feel like it's too high
Mm,
pressure, whereas I love to go to Hawaii for breaks and vacation because it's awesome, like, you get to eat delicious food and be on the beach and enjoy yourself, but I don't wanna be there forever because I just need a little break from scheduling. I want to be with people I love and enjoy myself. And then I do want to get back to my life because I also love the life that I have. And I think that's a really great distinction that people don't always quite realize. Like I had that version when I was a journalist where I was like, I really just wish I would like a job where all I do is make copies because I thought that was really easy. I was like, I just want to be the copy person. Just give me all your copies and I'll make copies and like that's all we need. And I like laugh now because it was like kind of like the equivalent of like
yeah.
being on, I could have elevated to beach in Hawaii, but like I was always just like, I just don't want to be in the life I have.
Hmm.
And it's like what you're saying when you're in that place, that's the time to start to understand and say, huh, I want to be a little curious about like, why do I have that idea that being on vacation on the beach forever is actually going to solve my problems versus looking at what is that deeper level of like passion and
Yeah.
curiosity. And because, I feel like we're talking about the same thing with different words of like,
Mhm.
what are you here to do? Who are you here to be? And each of us does have that. And I love how you help people access that through singing. And so I'd love to hear a little bit
Mhm.
more about that. Like, what do you find people find when they really give themselves that joy of singing?
Oh, what do they find? Like freedom, inner peace, calm. The I don't know how to describe that feeling, but it's the feeling that you can handle the whole world. Like everything is possible for you. You have endless possibility. It's that state of flow. They have put
Mm,
a term to it. It's flow, where there's no stress. There's only creative juices flowing, and it's expressing yourself.
mm,
Sometimes people find it way more easier to sing a certain topic than talk about it. So, as an
mm.
example, I got married last month, no, 2 months ago already. And
Congratulations.
thank you. I actually sang my vows because that was easier for me than telling them to my partner. And I know that music for him is an important part of our relationship as well. So I knew that doing it in that way and communicating in that way was also for him a way to connect even more. So I feel like music and singing has this, especially singing, because that's your voice, it's your personality. It's not like a external instrument. your voice is such a vulnerable, open, it's like it tells you everything. You can hear everything in a voice. You can hear when someone is emotional. You can hear when someone is really happy or really sad. Your voice tells a story. And making that connection with someone, in my opinion, especially on our wedding, it was so beautiful. And that's really the power that you can find when you're starting that singing journey, that connection with someone else, but also with yourself. Many singers that I work with, they discover so many things about themselves, or so many blockages that gets released just by making sound. And that for me is why I do what I do.
That's so cool. I had goosebumps when you shared it. Were you worried that you were, like, gonna cry, your voice would crack while you were doing it? Because your wedding is so emotional.
I know many people told me that. And no, to be honest, because I got the experience of performing, and I know exactly what I can do to train my mind so that I was in the right place there. So I know if I did not have all that preparation work beforehand, I could not have done it how I did it. The moment itself, in my eyes, was perfect. I did not have any stress. I, looked into his eyes. I said what I had to say. And it was not, because that's what I did not want it to be, the Maggie show, because people know I'm a
Mm,
singer. I want it really to be that story and the connection to my partner. And all of that was possible, yes, by a good preparation. So rehearsing, of course, getting the vocal techniques in. But the main thing that made it possible for me to be in that set mindset on the day was training my mind beforehand. And
mm,
what I love to do is something that you probably know as well. It's just visualizing the situation, but visualizing it from it's all going exactly how I want it to go. And I remember the first time I visualized it, I panicked. I was sweating. My heart started racing. That's kind of what you're supposed to be feeling the day of. But I
mhm,
felt that like a month before in my visualizations, because my brain doesn't know the difference between what is imagined and what is real. So I was just teaching my brain to feel safe in those kinds of situations. So I would imagine myself singing in front of him. I would feel all the feels that come up. I would feel the panic. I would feel the stress, and then calm my nervous system down. And I would do that exercise every week. And then a week before the wedding, every day. And at the end, I felt so peaceful and calm, and just present. And it was a beautiful moment. I
Oh,
don't
that's
remember the original question, but
Oh, well, it's so special. I mean, thank you for sharing that because I loved also how you're talking about preparing yourself and, like, and actually being in the action
Mhm.
to be in your expression was
Yeah.
really powerful, and I love the journey. Mhm.
Yeah, I think also really important to stress is that feeling of safety. And that's something we all struggle with, because our brain obviously is there to keep us safe. And then we all know the fight, flight, or freeze responses. Training our nervous system and our body to feel safe in those situations. I mean, of course, if there's a lion coming your way, then you need to run away or play dead. I don't know what you should be doing, but then it's normal to feel those things. But in a performance situation, it shouldn't be. And there are ways to work on that, and training your body, training your mind, and training your voice is definitely something that is necessary. And it's a practice that many singers forget. They only focus on the vocal parts, which again is
Mm.
really important, but the whole thing behind it as well.
Well, it's a really good analogy to or metaphor for, when you're doing anything that's kind of scary or intense, like, you're talking to your boss or you're having a hard conversation with a family member. Like, a lot of times we go in and we don't have that practice of, like, how do I settle myself? How do I keep
Mhm.
grounded? Because, like, to me, nervous system regulation is, like, such a huge part of what I always am teaching as well. Because if you don't have that, you're not going to be able to access, like, being in your purpose, because your purpose is
Mhm.
going to come with, like, scary things like singing on a stage. And you're
Yes.
like, I don't know how to deal with this if you're not really consistently looking back at that. So I love that that's a big part of what you teach people.
And I love that you're talking about that nervous system regulation, because that's exactly what happens when you're singing. We're using that diaphragmatic breathing, we're
Mm,
singing long notes. So it's actually scientifically proven that singing helps to calm down your nervous system and to release any stress. Obviously, we can put ourselves in some situations like a performance where the mind, like, and then the breath creeps up, and then we're not activating our diaphragmatic breathing anymore, and that's where all system go loose. But singing is definitely a way to calm that nervous system down, which is really interesting to see the overlap in between
That
what we
is
do.
so yeah, that is so interesting because, I think of music as like a way to regulate my nervous system, like the right kind of songs. But it
Mm.
is interesting because it's like singing in your car then is like a way to
Yeah.
regulate your nervous system, like to some
Yes.
great music.
Yep.
Yeah.
100%.
Or in the shower if you're a shower singer. I'm not, but maybe some people are. Oh, that's so powerful. And then I wanted to speak to because you also had mentioned to me that, singing is a way to de-stress and live a happy life. And so is it because of that? Like, could you speak a little bit more about how singing becomes that place for people?
Yeah. It becomes that place for people if you already have some kind of passion or affinity with music.
Mhm.
Looking at my brother, for example, he does not. So I don't think that will ever be the case for him because it's not something that he enjoys doing. So, in anything that you do, whether it's singing or for some people it's arts and crafts or sports, running or
Mhm.
yoga, like you did, whatever that thing is for you, it becomes that place of happiness and calmness once you can fully integrate into that flow. And so into getting into the flow, it's really important to first of all let go of all those fears of judgment, fears of failing, fears of whatever the fears might be. That's one piece of it. But also feeling the confidence of being able to do what you want to do. So if I want to sing a high note and I cannot sing that high note, then I will feel limited. On the other hand, if I learn the techniques to sing that high note, then I will feel very happy and very freeing singing that high note. So it's really the combination between making, first of all, the time to practice your skills, whatever that can be, painting, sculpting, singing. So making the time to practice and staying consistent, but also letting go of that practice so that you can get into that flow and really enjoying the process. That for me is the key.
Yeah, and then that's where we get that freedom and like feeling, oh, it actually is a de-stressing thing. It actually relaxes us.
Yeah.
And like you said, that diaphragmatic breathing and the focus.
Hmm.
Yeah, I love that. I love how it's just like a one particular way, but it shows us so much. I feel like whenever you're learning something new, like you're just like, "Oh, wow, like there's just so many ways you can personally expand by doing
Hmm.
it."
Yeah, I love what you said about focus. I got many singers that start their practice session with their minds all over the place. Like, what should
Mhm.
I be cooking for dinner tonight? Or my boss said this, and oh no, I got this and this to do at work. And then we start our practice, and they follow these 4 steps that I lay out for efficient practice. And because you're so focused on one specific thing, whether that's a vocal warm up or the lyrics of a song, or maybe it's an improvisation piece, you're so focused on the task at hand, which is singing. And it's not really a task, it's the thing that you love to do. So I don't want to call it a task, but you're so focused on the one thing that all of the other things that were going on in your mind tend to settle. And then oftentimes after about an hour, I ask them, so how are you feeling now compared to an hour ago? And they were like, oh, what was happening an hour ago? Like they were in a total different headspace, which I love because that's the power of doing what you love to do. It's putting all of your responsibilities and all of your to-dos on hold for just a little moment, and then focusing on you and replenishing your energy battery so that you feel like you can go out and tackle the world.
It's so true. Well, it really it feels like a form of like, yeah, caring and connecting for yourself is what you're
Hmm.
speaking to, and then just being really present. And it's
Yep.
an interesting thing because I come from yoga, but then I feel like now I still have talk about it all the time. It's like, how do you just get present in your life? And it sounds like singing is just like really powerful access to it because it's like, well, to sing well, you have to just be fully focused and
Yep.
only doing one thing, which I think is like that constant learning in our world where we're so distracted that
Hmm.
when you just do one thing, it actually relaxes you.
And you can even dive deeper into that, looking at, for example, the story of a song.
Mm,
Many people or many singers, they want to learn it by heart, so they're already thinking about what's the next line, what's the next line, and really training yourself to be in the words that you're saying. So if there's an I love you in the song, to actually feel that I love you. Or when you're saying you or I, like who's the you, who's the I, like what's the story behind the lyrics that you're singing? And that allows you to become more present as well, because then you're not looking ahead or looking back at, oh, that was good or that was not good. You're actually in the here and now telling a story, and that's
mm.
powerful.
That is so powerful. I love thinking about that. I'll feel like I'll think about that next time when I'm singing my lyrics in my car. Like, who
Yes.
am I singing to? So, so beautiful. Well, Maggie, what a lovely, rich conversation. It is time for our rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I am
Okay.
ready.
First one, so simple. What is on your nightstand?
On my nightstand, many things. I cannot see the bottom of it anymore, but there's many books on there, and also a set of cards with one question per card, and it's designed to entice like intimate conversations, but intimate in the sense of emotionally intimate, to get to know the
Mhm.
person that you're having that conversation with more. And my partner and I, every night before we go to sleep, we take one card, we ask each other that question, and then we go to sleep.
That's so beautiful. Do you know what card deck it is?
I can't give you the name, but I
Okay,
know
I'm
it by
curious because I
heart.
feel like there might be people here who are like, "Oh, I was like, I sounds like something that my husband and I would like to do too." Awesome.
I'll give
Okay,
you the
good.
name.
Yes, give me the name and then we'll put it in the show notes or
Yeah.
something. Okay. And then what was the last thing that you did that was new, and what was it?
Last thing that was new. The first thing that comes to mind is the handpan that I bought. So a handpan is an instrument that, how can I describe it? It's like a meditative instrument. It's not a steel drum, and it's not a tong drum, but it's in that family. And I just I love it because I'm a total beginner at it, and it just makes me realize what process my singers are going through learning their craft. I'm learning this craft, so it relaxes me, definitely.
Yeah, you just play it at night and kind of like work on it.
Yeah. And that's because I know you're talking about intuition also. This is an instrument that you, depending on how many notes you have, but the one I have is one that you cannot hit any wrong note. And
Mm.
so I love just jamming it out and just see, well, what's going to happen next, and just using my intuition to make pieces of music while my husband might be cooking, or while, we have some visitors coming in the house, and they think I've been playing it for years, but really I'm just jamming. I don't know anything about it.
I love that. That's so fun. I love the idea of just like having a new musical instrument in the
Yeah.
house and just like trying that. That's so
Yeah.
fun. Amazing. What was the last thing you watched on TV?
The last thing I watched on TV was yesterday, and it was a documentary about, oh man, it was a documentary. Yes, about people going into their like centenarians. So it's on Netflix. It's called Blue Zones, and it's this guy that goes to like different places in the world where people, there's like a high population of people over 100 years old, and he's looking into what their habits are and what's the secret
Oh,
to becoming old.
that's cool. I feel like I want to watch that. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Amazing. Okay, last one. What are the top 3 most used emojis on your phone?
Probably, if I by heart, definitely a heart, and
Mhm.
then the one with the stars in his eyes,
Oh, yeah, I
the
love that one.
starstruck one, and then I also have the party one with I don't know, with, yeah, like a party,
The little yeah, I
the
forget
little
what those are
thing,
called, but yeah.
and then with a hat.
Yes. I love that one too. I'm like, we're always celebrating something. It's
Yeah,
so fun.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
amazing. Well, Maggie, it's so great to have you on. What is the easiest way and best way for people to reach you or to find out more about you?
Definitely my website, which
Mhm.
is singinginsiders.com. And you can also find me on Instagram. It's Maggie and then underscore Gelin.
Gelin. Okay, amazing. Well, Maggie, thank you so much for sharing your own journey of self worth and how that applies to singing. And it's just such an interesting, insightful conversation. And I'm so grateful that you could join us here.
Thank you. It was really an honor to have this conversation with you. So thank you for giving me that opportunity.